Hey everyone, welcome to Telling Tall Tales the Right Way. I am your host, Heather Ostianvi. I am a best-selling editor, which is just me saying I've edited several adult nonfiction books that have gone on to become bestsellers. I've also edited dozens and dozens of children's books, and I am a lifelong journalist and reader and editor, and so I know a thing or two about what makes a good story. And what I focus on almost entirely is the elements of every great story. You can go back to episode one to get like the full accounting of that, and how they apply to really popular books or TV shows, single episodes of TV shows, maybe thematically, anything like that, right? And the same elements always apply to every story. It doesn't matter if you're doing adults or children's, fiction or non. Literally, oh, see, I said literally. I hate it when people say that. At any rate, all these elements apply to every story. It doesn't matter what the story is. And today I want to talk about Game of Thrones, which has been everyone's you know, target, because the lack of storytelling, basically, the lack of a journey that we were taken on as viewers, uh, specifically how seasons 7 and 8. Um, let's kindly say that they fell short. They fell short, and we're just going to leave it there. But millions of words have been written and said about, was Daenerys the Mad Queen? Did they set her up to be the Mad Queen? Was she already mad? Who knows? Also, like, why go through that whole thing with Arya and the Man of a Thousand Faces if we don't get the big, the big confrontation with Cersei, which is what we were all waiting for, right? But a lot's been written. We're not going to talk about any of that. What I hadn't seen, okay, so first of all, I need to tell you, I love television. Like, I love scripted TV, and I don't necessarily feel that I'm a little addicted to it, to be honest with you. I don't really feel like that's a problem, so there probably will not be a 12-step program in my future. But what I will tell you is that I will watch episodes of TV and then I will go read about them on the internet, right? Like, I'll look up recaps. I'll look up to see what, and those are by professional TV watchers, right? Who then like write about it. I'll go and look on and then read the comments underneath from like regular folks, right? Like just you and me, on what they thought about both the episode of TV and what's been written about it. That's what I do. But even with me doing, and full disclosure too, I caught Game of Thrones after it had originally aired. So I more or less binged it on HBO when it was so that's how I caught Game of Thrones. So I was still looking up the recaps. Oh, and I'm just going to tell you too, like, I waited to do this episode until my voice got a little bit better. It is not that great. So we're just going to go with the fact that it's a sexy voice. So just roll with that, okay? That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Having said that, I probably will have to cough a couple times, just letting you know. But what I hadn't really seen talked about very much was the White Walkers and how they really are more or less central to the whole point of the phrase, winter is coming. We only see them for a few minutes every season, and they're really quite terrifying, honestly. But when I went looking for, like, information about them, how I could talk about them, and I knew how I wanted to talk about them. And basically my point is, Game of Thrones lost an amazing storytelling opportunity by regulating the White Walkers, the Night King and the White Walkers, kind of shunting them off to the side and not giving them the full treatment, right? So this is what I found when I dove down into this White Walker rabbit hole. This is what I found. is the Night King. Okay, so the first White Walker was created to help children of the forest fight off the first men, humans, who came into the land of the children of the forest and basically decimated their ecosystem and their and by extension their society. Like, how many times have we heard that story about colonialism, right? Ooh. And so the children of the forest created the first White Walker to help. Well, there's been a couple of different schools of thought, right? So what the children of the forest created the first White Walker to help them fight off the first men. But then the White Walker, as we all know in literature, whatever you create tends to turn against you. So the White Walkers turned against the children of the forest, and the children of the forest and humans had to form an alliance, a treaty sort of thing. And they pushed the White Walkers north into like where it's perpetually winter all the time. And so then humans erected the wall, right? The Night's Watch wall, which is where Jon Snow goes. And they're the ones who watch for the White Walkers to come. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I was trying to do it in as succinct a way as possible. Now, there are people like you and me, people who live north of the wall that they got cut off from the rest of society but by the wall being built. Now they have their own society and whatever. They're kind of given short shrift as well, but the White Walkers in particular, they're portrayed as a zombie-like race of beings, a species, right? A zombie-like species. But this is where it gets confusing for me, is because the Night King, who leads the White Walkers, apparently was created by stabbing a human man with dragon glass. And that created the Night King, and then he went on to create more White Walkers. Now, there's a difference. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. So White Walkers are kind of zombie-like, but they also are like fully thinking sentient beings with agency. And then, but they can turn dead things, dead creatures like people or dragons, into wights, which is spelled W-I-G-H-T, a wight, which is like a more zombified zombie, whereas they're just like straight on killing machines. But the White Walkers have organization. They have like a society, but we don't know anything about them, right? They're built up to be this terrifying force, but we don't really understand them. We don't know them. Like we spend so much time with these other I guess I'm just going to use races of people, so to speak, in Game of Thrones, but they're not as much of an existential threat as the White Walkers are, because we keep hearing that winter is coming, which means Westeros is due for an attack. Well, in diving down this White Walker rabbit hole to talk about this and feel like understand like more about them and how they don't really fit in with the Game of Thrones narrative, like this is where we find out that, there was one in particular. What was it called? I'm going to tell you. It is on fandom.com, and it is a whole article called White Walkers Timeline, right? It actually has infographics to describe how, like the history of it, right? And so I just want to like show you really quick, like this is the Night King, okay? This is the Night King, right? He's a scary looking dude, right? He's made of ice and snow, I guess. I don't know why he needs clothes other than the show not showing completely naked people, although why that would have been a problem. Okay, different rabbit hole. Okay, but this is the Night King. And that's just what he does. Okay, so according to this like timeline that I found on fandom.com is that all like forming the White Walkers, fighting with the Children of the Forest, the alliance between Children of the Forest and the First Men, all happened like 12,000 years before Game of Thrones even starts. And between when the Children of the Forest and the First Men form this alliance to push the White Walkers north and then they build the wall is still like thousands of years. So they were just chilling? Like, what were they doing? Like, I mean, I don't know what an immortal being does for. I don't know. I don't know. And that's kind of the problem, right? Is like we have this presence, this threat to all of Westeros, right? King's Landing, Winterfell, Dragonstone, all the, I don't even know all the kingdoms. There's a lot of them. Anyway, there's an existential threat to the Seven Kingdoms. And the White Walkers and the Night King are just hanging out for thousands of years until they get like a whiff that there's some battle for the Iron Throne, and now suddenly they're like, "Whoop, we're awake and we're up and going." I just gotta don't buy that. But at any rate, one of the things that the White Walkers are zombies, basically, with agency and thinking ability. They're not just like killing machines. They're very methodical, and they make their choices on who they want to make into a White Walker very carefully. Babies are a big deal. They like to turn babies into White Walkers. Now, this is where I get a little confused. Does that mean that babies, like White Walkers, can have children and they can grow into adult White Walkers? Like, I mean, maybe does the biology matter that much? Because honestly, this dude, should he be procreating? I don't know. But there is another way that the White Walkers increase their numbers, and that's by turning the dead into zombies. They're the whites, right? WIGHT. Now, those are straight up killing machines. As like they can just go, they just march forward and like murder and mayhem is their business. But this is where the White Walkers also borrow something from the writers for Game of Thrones, the series. And I don't know about the books because I haven't read the books, but the series borrows from some vampire lore. So some lore in vampire land is that if you kill the Maker, all the vampires the Maker has made also die. So if you kill a White Walker, all of the whites that it has killed will also die, which is kind of a big deal because a White Walker really only needs to touch a dead creature to turn it into a white. So think about how many, like, if you're in battle, probably touch lots of dead people, turn them into whites, so then you just kill the Maker and all the whites die, right? Which sounds much more simple, easier said than done, right? But here's why I think it's kind of important too that we don't know that much about them is because Game of Thrones, first of all, doesn't spend enough time on the White Walkers and the Night King in particular to let us know, like, it goes back to like actors, right? Like, what's my motivation? Which is about like characters, right? Like, what's the character's motivation? Like, they had some really rich storytelling opportunity, and I know economy of characters and whatever, but let's face it, Game of Thrones has like hundreds of freaking characters, hundreds of them. So does it really, would it have hurt the story to spend a little bit of time with the Night King and find out a little bit more about that world and like why they're so hell-bent on like making winter arrive? Like after sleeping for 1,000, like I'm just very confused about that. But anyway, that was a rich storytelling opportunity that was left behind. But then what happened in season 8, the final season of Game of Thrones, is that that's where the writers just like, I feel like they just threw up their hands. They were like, you know what, screw it. Like we don't have like we're not being given enough time to actually create a believable narrative. And before anybody gets all like, oh, believable, it's fantasy. Yes, of course, right? But again, when you create a world and you prescribe certain rules to that world, that becomes the reality of that world, right? So you can't like. So I think so. This is what I think. I think the writers just threw up their hands. They were like, fuck it, we don't have enough time to tell this story. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to make them like a killing force. The Night King is a Night King and maybe a couple of his commanders. They're the only ones who are allowed to like be any type of sentient being, right? Like to think and feel and plan and, whatever, right? They're the only ones who can do that. Otherwise, all the other White Walkers are just nameless, faceless soldiers who just march on, right? Like they're all their individuality, the potential for their individuality just goes out the window, just out the window. So then we don't really know, we don't know anything about them. And I just really, there just is, they're more like straightforward antagonists as opposed to like nuanced people who could have a chance at redemption, right? So think about Cersei and how she is a horrible human being. She's terrible. But we see glimpses of her humanity. And there are moments where she could turn the corner, right? Now, the Night King, we don't get any such treatment for him, even though the White Walkers are supposed to be this big, scary force. Oh no, right? Like we don't get any of that. And that is kind of the problem for me. I don't like the fact that they're these big, scary people, beings, species. Either way. But they're supposed to be the biggest threat to Westeros and the humans that live there. But we don't really understand much about them. And so to me, they're not scary because we don't. Well, let me rephrase. They're scary because of the damage they can do that we've seen them do. But they're not scary in a way they could be if we understood and had been shown more about their society. Like, do they live in villages? Do they like go? Let's go back to that. Do they even have babies? Why do they have to turn like human babies into? I like this is very confusing for me, and it all seems very incongruent too, right? Like it's very inconsistent and incongruent with the way everyone else is addressed in this show. And again, okay, we can talk about economy of characters and time, blah blah blah, right? Whatever, but then maybe don't put so much like emphasis on the whole winter is coming thing. Like, don't make that the penultimate battle on which the entire series hinges. Like that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And here's another thing too. The books, from my understanding, this is again research that I did before coming on here to talk about this. The books haven't caught up to where the series even ended, even though I would be super surprised if the books follow the trajectory of the show. Like, truly, I would be. Because I know that there was a lot in the show that changed how people and places were represented and how certain parts of the timeline were represented in the books, right? That's not unusual. But the show, okay, so let's talk just for a moment too. We are going to bring Arya into this a little bit because she ultimately kills the Night King. It is so ridiculous. If you, I probably should have. I probably should have prefaced this with there's going to be a lot of spoilers, but that's just how it goes. But here's the thing. Arya kills the Night King, and it's not even that spectacular. Like, she just basically runs up on him, jumps, and like stabs him. That's how she kills him. I can feel your eye rolls. I can feel your eye rolls, right? Like, here's this big bad dude. He's been asleep for thousands of years. Well, we assume he's been asleep. He's marching on Westeros. He conquers the wall. He's moving into, Winterfell and whatever. Everything's turning to winter. Oh God, oh God, oh God. And Arya just stabs him. That's how he dies. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. So I don't know. I don't know. Excuse me. But what I will say is that for any series that is as ambitious as Game of Thrones, more care should have been taken to ensure that the threat against which everyone ultimately is going to fight has to be worthy of the fear it seems to inspire in the characters. And I do not feel that the treatment the White Walkers and the Night King are given live up to that. So that is all I will say. And I would love to hear it. Again, let me know what you think. Leave comments. If you have suggestions on what you want me to talk about in terms of storytelling, books, TV series, specifically, I would like if you could narrow it down to like episodes of TV series, that would be better. Or if you have something that's more like, not like a theme, but maybe an element, like the vampire tears in True Blood. That's an element that spans the whole trajectory of the show. Let me know because I would love to talk about them. But anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope that you all are having an amazing morning, afternoon, or evening. And I will look. I will look for you in my next episode when we are going to talk about The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I'm just going to tell you now, spoiler alert, it is one of the most beautiful books ever written. And that's all I will say. And I will see you next time.